we have another question specifically for you, Randy, which was, how was working on the Star Wars games in terms of creative freedom for developers and game designers?
Well, so, LucasArts was interesting in that it had a very tight relationship with Lucasfilm and Lucasfilm licensing. And so generally early on with any of these approaches, there was a dialogue around what we could do that they would approve of. I think that over time that we gained freedom over time as we developed trust with them that we were treating the property effectively. But I think that one of the unique things about Lucasfilm, LucasArts, was that we were able to operate outside of the storyline of the product itself, or out of the franchise films themselves. What I mean by that is that a lot of movie titles end up with, if you're developing a movie title, you're often having a conversation around what did the movie do?
Yeah.
And really what they mean is, what is the story of that film? And then if you're not interacting with people that are sensitive to interactivity, they assume that you need to follow the story. We've got a visitor out front, so
that's all right.
If they're not familiar with interactivity or the requirements for interactivity and what that means for a game, you can often get into a conversation around, why you don't want to follow the story too closely. That is to say that you need space outside of the story in order to make it interactive. If you do exactly what the story did, it's not going to. Exactly. All the decisions are made. It's the narrative. So
there goes your interactivity, and then it's also a fairly limited story. So oftentimes you're then stuck creating some kind of filler in between those things, and
exactly.
Or you have an hour and a half experience.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that at Lucas we had a good relationship in that regard, and we would often follow the storyline, and then use the storyline to establish periphery that was outside of that narrative. Yeah. And so we were actually filling in aspects of the world that the films didn't necessarily cover. I think that was a great opportunity. By contrast, I've been involved with film projects that were very restrictive. I was at EA and involved in a Bond film project that, the problem was that we couldn't convince them that we needed to do these things on the outside of the film. And so you end up with a game on rails.
Yep.
And that is not nearly as interesting. And also it tends to be a much shorter experience because the film's only an hour and a half.
Indeed. So, Randy, we're moving on to another, thing that's a little bit closer more to the major game companies again, which is the question if whether or not we see major game companies like Blizzard or Epic Games adopt blockchain in the next 5 years. Now, we've obviously covered how they look at it, but Randy, do you see these companies coming into that space in the next 5 years, and if so, why or why not? What would be the reason?
Well, I think they will come when the market's demonstrated itself, and I, personally, I believe that that market will be demonstrated. Mm-hmm. That particularly with an MMO, economy is a key element of these products, and I would argue that you can demonstrate a more vibrant economy by exposing that, by making it a more open system.
Yeah.
But until that is established, unless the evidence is there, I think that they'll be slow to move.
Yeah, they'll stick to their proven plays, but if someone can show that you can pull like 1 million players into a blockchain MMO, right? For example, that would be a big pull for them to say, okay, this is definitely something where we can scale and can deploy something.
There's no question. They'll go where the audience is. If the audience goes there, they'll come.
Right. Yeah. So I'm immediately going to follow that up with someone, because obviously, that's one of the things we're trying to accomplish at Ember Sword, to really, bring an MMO in this every sense of the word that we know them in the traditional games industry, and just, bring in some of these best, items that and properties that come from the blockchain technology. So the question that we got to you, Randy, was what actually were the key elements that attracted you to a game like Ember Sword, and what's your view on blockchain for gaming heading forward?
Well, and I mentioned this earlier, but I think production quality is the thing that really struck me. It has the product has a unique look that is it's easy for me to project my imagination into that world and appreciate the potentials of what that would be like exploring.
Which is a great compliment, I would say, Randy, coming from someone who has worked on some worlds that I think live on in all our imaginations, whether, let's say, they were worlds that were pre-established, but also, some of the, for example, great adventure games that you've worked on.
Oh, thank you. But, I think that I want to give you the compliment here, because the fact is, it's very hard to create something that has both that sense of quality, but is also somewhat unique. There are a lot of products out there that just look like each other, and it's a very challenging balance of getting getting that level of refinement around something that is actually differentiated. And I think that with what you've been able to show so far, you've been able to achieve that, in my view.
Yeah, I mean, I would have to also pass that compliment down to the team, of course, because you're totally right, Randy. It's so tough to make something, especially with so many things having been done already, that doesn't feel like, oh, the next X or the next Y, and is so familiar. So it's really awesome to see, how all of these different talents are kind of pulling together to come up with, this unique visual style, this unique world, this unique lore, all these unique elements that really make Ember Sword Ember Sword. I think that's, as you know, it's one of those gratifying things of, being involved in the creation of a world like this at a high level.